the thing that made you hard enough to be able to do the things that you're doing, will your kids have exposure to things that will make them hard enough to face the world when things get tough?
So I talk with my kids now about everything. I have a 4-year-old and 3-year-old, right? My son just broke his arms playing at the park, and like, he's a hard charging little kid, right? And I encourage that in him. And like, I don't know if I'm doing it wrong. You know what I'm saying? We'll find out 20 years from now when I look back, and I'll probably see all the stuff that I'm doing wrong right now. But I think that like some of the stuff that, you know, I'm not a victim of my family or where I grew up or any of that, right? I just choose not to be. But some of that stuff wasn't the best. I'll say that. My son broke his arms. I loved him. Picked him up. Talked to him. And then I didn't make him go back to the park, right? But we went back to the park very soon after that, where he broke his arms and did it again, right? And so I try to tell him now, and I know that he doesn't understand it, because he'll talk about like he's done judo, right? Like we'd take him to do judo classes, or he's a big kid.
Is he doing judo or jiu-jitsu?
He was doing some judo, and then but we landed on jiu-jitsu, right? And so he's doing jiu-jitsu, and he's like, I don't want to go. I'm afraid. I have videos of it. You know, he's like, I'm afraid, and he wouldn't let me take my arms from around him. And I'm sitting in there and I'm like questioning it, you know, like, man, should he be in here? And I'm like freaking my kid out. Am I making him do this stuff? And he'd sit on my lap. I'd go to take my arms off of him, and he'd grab my arms and make me hug him again and make him feel safe, you know. And I just sat after that, and I said, you know, it's okay that you're afraid. You know, it's okay that you're afraid. Everyone's afraid, you know, but what is not okay in this family is to keep, you know, like the fear from you acting and trying, right? And so I try to instill that in him in a safe way, in a loving way, rather than like the way I grew up, where it's like, you're afraid because it's dangerous as fuck. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
So like, man, I was afraid every time I fought. You know what I mean? I was afraid anytime any of that crap happened. I'm terrified. And you learn to react. You know what I mean? If you're afraid, you better make somebody terrified quick. You know what I mean? Before it gets out of control. I hope he doesn't have that, you know, that like reactionary fear, you know, or violence or whatever. But I won't, he works, you know, like he contributes. And I hope that what I'm able to give him is the support and the love and the means to do the stuff that he wants to do to face his fears, right?
Yeah, man.
And so if we go broke, you know, if I lose everything and you know, I risked it all and did it wrong, like, I know we'll be okay that way too, you know. But so I encourage my son, and I was putting him in the, and some of this stuff is whatever. I don't care. This is the stuff people probably don't talk about. But like, I got like hit when I was a kid, like bad. I remember like, and I don't know, like I'm going to tie all this back in. I came here to talk about turnover, right? Yeah. And so I want to talk about all this stuff and like how it relates to that, right? So here's a story that's real sad from when I was a kid. I used to sit in this little spot, and I don't know who will hear this, but like, and I don't want to talk too much about my family. Like, my mom still lives here, and I don't want to like embarrass her or anything, but she had some problems. I'll just leave it at that. I'm sitting on this couch, and thank you, dude. I used to sit in this little spot where I felt like comfortable and safe. And I would sit on the edge of this couch, and I'd have my feet up against this little bookcase thing. And that was just where I happened to fit. And you got good books here, dude.
You'd like that. Only an Irish boy, Horatio Alger. You'd like that.
I'll get it.
You can borrow that one.
I'll read it. Is it nonfiction?
Yeah, it's Horatio Alger came up as an orphan. He wrote all these books about like how to be the right kind of kid. They're great books.
I'll read it.
My buddy Travis gave me that book.
Right on. I'll give it back to you. I'll read it. I will. I'm sitting in this spot. My feet break through this glass, right? This is where I always just sit. My feet break through this glass where I would like wedge myself into. I was a little kid, dude. I was younger than my son is now. My feet went through the glass, cuts my legs, and like we didn't have shit, you know what I mean? And I broke the bookcase that was nice, right? And so like my parents are both hitting me. And I remember thinking like, I'm like, my legs are bleeding, you know, like hug me, you know what I mean? Like I'm hurt. And what they were like, and I understand where they came from too. Like, man, this is like, we don't have shit and you just broke the thing that we have. I can understand them being upset. But now,
wow, man,
right?
that is an understanding person. That's deep.
I try to, it's taken probably a while to get there, dude. But now that I have a kid, you know, and like I put him in his car seat the other day. I don't know, not the other day, maybe it was 6 months ago. He punched me in my forehead. Like I leaned over to buckle him in, he bow. And he like knows how to punch. So he like turned his wrist and everything and hit me in my forehead. And I like backed up. I looked at him for a second and my instinct was to smack him, you know? And I was like, my first thought was, he doesn't know why he did that. You know, he just like smiled at me. He like did it and then smiled at me. And I was like, good punch, buddy. Right. And I was like, that was good. We don't punch our friends and family in the face. You know, if we want to wrestle, like this is off limits. You know, the head and face is off limits, which might be a Hoosier way to teach your kids.
No, dude, that is like Piaget. Like you nailed it. It's
really,
kids are always trying to find out how can I exert my strength? What are the boundaries? And if you pop back at them and make them frightened, now you've just pushed them and said, you know, don't be that strong, be like this. But you were able to have presence of mind to say, good strength, apply in a different way. That's dude, that is child psychology. You just hit a 10. Just hit a 10.
Well, thanks, dude. And that's so I try to teach him that way, right? And and see where, you know, when I like where we can grow, and nothing that he does is wrong. Nothing. Let me say that again. There's context for everything, right? He's a little kid. He's discovering his dick. You know what I mean? Like he wants to pull it out. I'm like, that's fine at the house. Like that's for the family. You can't show that to other people. You know, he'll like hear me say crazy stuff. You know what I mean? Which you know, and I don't like try to get to, I like try to temper myself around him, right? Like I'm usually like pretty high strung and like scream and get crazy. And like for the first couple of years of his life, I was like calm around him. You know what I mean? And I could talk to you forever, dude.
We can do this as many times as we want. I know you said you had to go in a little bit, but I've got you on the time.
We're good. Thanks, dude. I would stack stuff up on his head in the shower, right? Like, so we'd stay to the shower and I'd be like, okay, now we got to get real still. And I'd stack a shower, you know, a shampoo cap on his head. And then and then eventually from the shampoo cap, he could like focus for a minute and like still and keep focus on something outside of himself. Right. So that he could be calm. And I'd like, you know, we eventually end up putting like a little, you know, shampoo bottles on his head and stuff like that. I'm like, man, this is so weird. But like the stuff that is important to me now is like being able to like calm down, being able to turn on the animal. You know what I'm saying? When like I couldn't turn it off before, you know, of like, you know, I'd get to where I want to be, but everything around me would be smashed.
Have you heard of like Jungian psychology, Carl Jung?
Carl Jung? Yeah, dude.
Integrating his shadow. Like that's the concept of you are not a full person, particularly a man in particular, until you know what you're capable of doing, but then don't do it.
Yeah, dude.
Because once you know, like, you know, it's no virtue to be weak and not fight. You can't fight, you know, a rabbit isn't a virtuous thing because it doesn't fight, right? It's, do you have the capacity in you to know how to exert your will over something like your child, for example, but then decide, no, I'm not going to do that because that's not actually the way that I want to be. Then that's the full manifestation of being human.
You're doing that stuff now. I just realized is you're doing that right now, dude. You could have guided this thing wherever you wanted to go for you, right? And we've gone all over the place. And you're like, that's what I was like, I haven't realized why you're good at this until just now you said that.
This is a blast, man. I'm so deeply moved at how open you've been. And,
well, thanks, dude.
Like, I feel like every time I ask you a question, you know, I have a friend who I'll invite him on the podcast sometime. A guy, his name is Jared Holst, and he's so smart that it's intimidating. It's like, you know, we start talking about China and I think I know a lot about it and he knows so much more than I do. And so, you know, maybe that's what's kept me from inviting him on the podcast. But one time I asked him, you know, hey, what do you think of the podcast? And he was telling me, and then he said, what do you think you learned from that interview? And I realized that I had done an interview where I hadn't asked questions that I didn't already know the answer to. And so after talking to Jared, I came to the realization that the podcasts are a lot more interesting. Not if I'm like, hey, I know this interesting thing that this person knows, so I'm going to find a way to bring it out in them. But instead, I ask questions that I genuinely don't know what you're going to say. And you have been a rare guest that, like, literally, I have no idea what you're going to say.
It's tight. Well, that's you, dude. I mean, most of these things, when I do, like, because I get asked to speak at colleges or all this crap all the time, and it's always like, how did you start Strange Donuts? You know what I mean? And I'm like, all right, here we go. You know what I mean? It's like the same softball questions, dude. This has been tight. So, like, me being open is a tribute to you.
Thanks for checking out this podcast short. The rest of the interview is on my page, or you can listen to the audio version at the Vance Crowe Podcast.